Okay, if it's all right with everybody, I'd like to call the meeting of the September 2nd Policy Committee meeting to order. And if we can go around and do our introductions, that would be great.
You want me to start? Sure. Alyssa Tracy.
Tony Veet, Chair.
Cullen McGough.
Hopkins, Superintendent.
And let's see, first up. So just to reflect, we have 3 members here and 3 not present. We are moving ahead. We've got 1 more coming in.
No. You're right outside the door.
Thank you. So actually, we'll take a brief pause.
Doing great, Tony.
I
I know. Just wing it.
don't know.
Yeah.
There it is.
There it is. That's what I was looking for.
And while we're waiting, I would request that the policy committee adjust the order of the agenda. I think BED, the remote participation in school board meetings, is going to take a little bit more time. I want to leave plenty of opportunity for a conversation. And I think that JHCA, the open closed campus, that policy and the graduation requirements, IKF, I think that's simpler. And so I don't know why it says adjourn, open campus, closed campus adjourn. That should just say open closed campus. I just think that those policies are simpler and that we can just fly through them a little bit more readily. That makes sense.
Yeah, sounds good. Do we need a motion to adjust the agenda? We'll do BED last, yeah. Great.
So if we do the first one, JHCA, which is open closed campus. Tony, it's my understanding that you had a heavy hand in working through this policy with Angela Hardy, the Director of Curriculum Instruction, and Chad Kempton, the principal of Gardner Area High School. So I don't know if you want to take the lead on this and the changes?
I'm happy to on the changes. I actually have a few more to throw in there as usual, but they're more like commas and stuff like that.
Okay.
So we had talked about it actually in the curriculum committee meeting. And let's see, so just some of the rephrasing in there, obviously in red, and it's really more about language. It's sort of hard to read all at once, but just to add that if you read that, I keep reading that, the lined through stuff sometimes. So a language thing of, just to make sure that students who have been dismissed from school at the end of the school day, and juniors and seniors who are exercising open campus privileges, they're the exception to all students shall remain on school grounds through the end of the day. There's some language here that actually I do want to adapt a little bit. So we just lined out, a student must meet the following criteria. We, detailed what each student must, what the student must do for A, B, and actually C, and I want to make a little change on, because we use the language on A and B, the student must be, and so on C, it says the student is, and I wonder if we should change that to the student must be enrolled in at least 5 courses per semester.
Makes sense.
Okay.
And then there's a little, I think it's a little errata there on B, where it says eligibility. If you can see that, it says dash eligibility. I'm not sure we need the dash, or if that might be a just the line
Oh,
through.
the space might have put it there, yeah.
The space might have,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would want to, yeah, change that. And then, let's see, a couple other details here. Let's see. D, we should have the language, the student must behave lawfully and in accordance. So that was some of that language carried over from the
From the
setup
other one.
paragraph, yeah. So now we're changing it to must.
Mhm.
Let's see. Oh, there's a typo in here too, actually, so it's on C. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit. So it says seniors 45 hours of community CERC prior to semester 1, and I'm pretty sure it should just say service.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I wondered about changing changing the statement. Let's see. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so we're still in C, and it says. So it's partway through C. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the following adjustments have been made to the community service eligibility requirements for open campus for the upcoming school years. And part of what we were looking at doing, I think, with the idea of making things fit time-wise, is to say something like the upcoming school years, so that we know that there's an adaptation and then there's basically a sunset piece at the end of this, that from 2025 on, it'll return to normal, or the previous plan. I was sort of wondering, changing upcoming years to the following school years. I don't know.
Makes sense, yeah.
It's, yeah, just it feels like, because at some point they won't be the upcoming years. At some point this will be past and they won't be upcoming anymore. But so it's sort of the following listed list of school years.
Is that it for a campus to the following school years or to the following
I would say
listed school
the
years?
following listed school years. Yeah. If that makes
So
sense.
you're covering all the classes too by covering anyone in the school this year, because that'll be affected and progressively change.
Exactly.
Makes sense, yeah.
Is that okay? Does that make sense? Sounds good to me.
Cool. Just a little language thing, and maybe it's just me, but I appreciate it. Let's see, a little bit of other, sort of like there's a space between section D and section E, maybe 2 spaces.
Yeah, we'll clean up all that
Yeah.
formatting stuff
Yeah.
when it's
And then
finalized.
there's an extra section D after E.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And the date at the end again is wrong because the board will
Oh.
not have approved it in
Oh,
September.
right.
The earliest it will be approved will be November at the earliest. So I know that. She was just putting it there as a placeholder. The other question that I had when I read it was actually under A. And so under A, it says the student must have a signed open campus permission form on file in the main office at Gardner Area High School. Then if the student is under the age of 18, a parent guardian signature will also be required on the open campus form. That all sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Then it says the student will not be allowed to utilize open campus privileges until a signed permission form is on file in the main office. Isn't that redundant?
Yeah.
Doesn't it pretty much already say that in the
I was gonna
first
say, oh, you move it
sentence?
to the beginning, or you just take it out, yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I'd say, yeah, take it out. Good
Yeah.
call. It
Yeah.
says just the opposite of the first sentence. They have to
Right,
have one.
just the other way.
If they don't have one, they can't do it.
Yeah, just,
Yeah,
Okay.
cool, nice. I know, right? We put in all this other stuff.
Because of the way it's rewritten under D, you might want to start it in the same structure. The student must.
Yes,
Under D, right, the student must behave lawfully. Yes, yep. I've added that. Thank you. Okay.
So,
Any other changes with this one? Yeah. There's lots of stuff here. We get these.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
And I assume, Pat, you've already thought about this. Does the provision requiring the periodic checks of the permission form create any undue burden on the administration itself?
That is, my understanding, that is already the existing practice, that is performed. So, okay.
On
It's
E,
not magically happen.
the automatic,
it's
yeah.
already part, on E, does, when we say the parent guardian may request, that's irregardless of their age, I assume. Do we have to be explicit in that? Like if the student, if they're 18 and their parent does it, is that still okay, or are we?
Yeah, as
Okay.
long as they're still in school, the
Gotcha.
parents still have
Okay.
that right.
Just one of those, like if somebody were to try to
I think,
explain that.
I think if they're over 18 and not living at home.
That's different.
That's
that might
different, okay.
shift it, but-
That makes sense. Okay, very good. Otherwise, I agree.
Okay, you guys are, both of you are set?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so then there are a couple changes. Why don't I start in the back with the highlighted one? That was reviewed by the curriculum committee, right? And so the curriculum committee under G, so the last section. So the last section in G, it talks about the honors and the awards at graduation. So in order to be eligible for the valedictorian and salutatorian graduation honors and top 10, because the school board has already voted, that
Yes.
top 10 will be a part. So we needed to add that in.
Yep.
But also something else that came up this year, and it has happened in the past, is that graduation, the grades, the final grades are not calculated until after everything is done. And what can happen is that the calculation can potentially change the kind of the status of where students fell in the, I don't know how I want to word it, but in like the top 10. And so that happened this year. So we had a valedictorian and a salutatorian. They gave their speeches at graduation. And then when all of the calculations were done, their positions switched. And the salutatorian was really the valedictorian, and other people switched. You know, maybe the person who was in 8th became 10th, and that was in 10th became 8th.
Mhm.
So that created some concerns,
Right.
clearly.
Yeah.
And there were family members who didn't understand that could happen. So curriculum committee discussed this. And so this last section, that while designations of honors will be calculated in the spring semester prior to graduation and recognized at graduation, honor status may change based upon final calculation of grades upon the close of the semester after graduation ceremonies have concluded, just to make it really, really clear.
Do we have to say anything about like the transcripts will be reflected or anything like that too, Pat, do you think?
I don't think
Okay.
so,
Okay.
because clearly we're not going to be able to finalize the transcripts until the grades are done anyway.
Gotcha, okay. Just because I know that's probably where they're headed, right, with the college application, if it does help or something.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
yeah,
Schools handle this all differently, you know,
Yeah.
and we strongly believe that the entire year should count.
right, right.
No, the entire year should count. And if the entire year counts, then we run a risk of this happening.
Right.
And they work harder all year.
They what?
They work harder all year.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you say
motivation,
second semester doesn't matter, then they're not
Right.
going to work all year. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So that's the one change. And then the other change, I would switch back. This is not highlighted in any way. I was just reading this, thinking, why are we keeping this language in here? But on page 2, it talks about community service. And already we've modified this policy based on changes to the community service hours due to the pandemic. So I was wondering if we should just at this point eliminate number 1 and number 2, class of 2020, class of 2021. They've already graduated. Why are we still keeping them in a policy if we're updating the policy? And instead in the paragraph above where it says students enrolled in the graduating classes of, it would be 2022 to 2024.
And use the other
Correct.
language. Yep,
Correct.
agreed.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep. Nice catch. And I do see that this one, like the other one, has this sort of sunset piece that it returns graduating classes beyond 2024 will be required to complete 60 hours. So
Mhm.
it returns to that sort of that expectation. As far as like taking out the rest of these, like that'll just be for the next time this is reviewed in presumably 5 years or whatever.
Yeah,
We would
or
just-
if something else happens,
Yes, we
right,
would just-
right.
And maybe pronouns again, Pat, I see them in C.
Oh, thank you. Every
Yeah.
time I've seen a policy, I've tried to
I know.
update those.
It's
So
the same, yeah.
thank you. I will be honest, I didn't read line for line
No,
on
and
this.
that may be a find in
Yep.
place type of thing. Yep, very good.
Great, thank you. All right, any other changes?
I have, I think a couple. One of them that jumped out is, so top of page 4, it says Roman numeral 3. I didn't see Roman numeral 1 or 2 in there.
I'm sorry, Tony, where are you?
So top of page 4,
Yeah, it's kind of come out of nowhere.
it's 3,
Yeah,
and then I've looked back on the other
the
pages.
letters, right?
And they're all letters or just have their own sort of section look to them. So I would either say what happened to 1 and 2,
Right, or just take it out.
or just take 3 out either.
Yeah.
And then-
So.
If-
So between pages 1 and 2, there's no A.
oh.
So top of page 2,
Oh,
we
yeah,
start
there
with
isn't.
B, but there is no A.
Right,
So, all right, we'll have to look at that formatting. Great catch. And I wonder what happened over the years.
that might
Right.
have been one that was left, yeah.
A format was changed and it wasn't carried through.
Nice catch on the A, yeah, I did not.
And I caught another his, her on the top of page
Yeah.
4. So,
Nice job. That's why we do this together.
Right, exactly. We all see it different.
okay. I will also skim it one more time to make sure it's gender neutral.
Tony, if I ever write a book, I want you to proofread it.
Yeah, seriously. Agree.
Okay.
Let me know. I'll go with it.
He's available.
I've thought about editing, and this is like stuff, I mean, I learned in Maine public schools, but it just like my brain just works that way. It's not like I could figure out why I'm saying it, but some of it just jumps out, The little voice says. But,
Anything else?
Actually, there's one thing, actually, back to the top of page 4, I think, it's that sort of opening. Yeah, let me see where I put my note on. Yeah, it says, you'll meet with your, actually it says his, her school counselor, so the
I got it.
pronouns, yeah.
Yeah.
proceed through the credit requirement checklist to ensure that the request will enable and not prohibit a student from meeting the required graduation requirements. So enable and not prohibit felt sort of just weird to me, but maybe we need to have it in there. I don't know if that's, I don't know, if we just make sure the request will enable the student to meet all the required graduation requirements.
Right, sort of like a negative.
It-
the way
yeah.
Says it.
I don't feel strongly one way or the
Yeah.
other, so,
And we can leave it in there. It just kind of jumped out at me a little bit. but-
yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
What are we replacing his, her with
They,
They.
today?
So, I mean, I can leave it in there. I just wanted to point it out.
it's
Let's
entirely up to you, I just,
leave it. I just, yeah.
okay.
Um,
Any others?
D, extended study. Students are eligible for extended years of study to complete the requirements of the diploma if they have not reached the age as defined by Maine law at the start of the school year. And I'm wondering what age. I'm thinking the age that in which they age out. What are the,
Yes, that's what it would mean. It would mean by the age in which they age out, which right now, by Maine law is 20. Again, remember all the conversations we had
Right.
last year
Mhm.
Yeah.
about they're encouraging us to change it to 22 because there was a lawsuit in
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. Thank you. I was gonna say Maryland.
My hometown, that's why, home state, that's why I remember.
That was your hometown?
Home state, yeah, Rhode Island, yeah.
it stood out.
But Maine law presently says, it
Still
says
says.
20.
Yeah,
Do we want to, I would want to put in there if they have not reached the age of aging out. I don't quite know how to phrase that, but.
the age as defined by Maine law to age out, is that
Yeah,
sort
that's-
of what you're thinking?
yeah.
Yeah. Just add that. So then it's like saying what it's meaning without having to go figure that out.
The age out limit. The upper age limit for attending. I mean, I think we all know what it means.
So maybe it's reach the upper age limit for attending a public school as
Yes.
defined by Maine law.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
because that's what, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think I just had like, two other things for certificate of completion, E. Do we want to change that? May approve a certificate of completion to capitals of certificate of completion. I mean, it's already titled with the capitals, but then the statement in E
Mhm.
is lowercase, but I thought just to
Sure.
recognize the gravity of what that is,
Mhm.
which is kind of what drove a lot of this too, right?
Mhm.
And the only other thing that I was wondering about, should we define what the grade point for the Latin honors in the policy? It says it in the handbook, what the GPA is for the Latin honors. The policy does not say what GPA distinguishes cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. But the handbook does.
I don't think you want to.
Okay.
I mean, you don't distinguish here what a grade is for honors, right?
Good point.
So I think some of those specifics, they really are in the handbook, and so it
What's
talks
the
about
rate?
that this is a complement to the handbook,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah. Actually, no, good point that we can be more, yeah, we can name it in the handbook of the year, that this is what it means.
Right,
And leave the policy able to just be flexible.
To reference
Yep.
it, yeah,
right.
Cool.
yeah.
I'm fine.
Can I ask the history, just because I'm the new guy, why do you have to be enrolled for 4 semesters to be considered for valedictorian and salutatorian or top 10, but only 2 semesters for Latin honors?
I think some of the history predates me.
Okay.
I think that at one time, there were issues with someone coming in, maybe as a senior or second semester senior who really hadn't been involved in our curriculum. And so it's difficult for us to know whether the curriculum that someone else comes from is of the same rigor as ours. And so to have them come in and potentially bump a member of our student body who throughout their 4 years had received our curriculum, that we know that just didn't feel right. I think it may have happened once or twice, and so that was established. Why that's different for Latin honors, I can't answer the question, Colin, I don't know.
Well, should we have it the same for the Latin?
I would want to, if that's what you guys want to entertain, I would want to do that research first, just because I don't have the history. Chad would, he's been here for so many years. He would know the reason why, and he's the one who really brought in the Latin honors in the first place. And so he would be able to explain why it was differentiated.
I mean, for efficiency's sake, if nobody has challenged it and asked for a change, I don't think it's worth the time to revise a policy over or, refer
Well,
back.
where this just came in
Yeah.
last year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I think maybe we should research it just because it was new last year. I mean, if we have it 4 semesters for one, why not both? But
Yeah.
we rely on Pat's research.
I will make a note, yeah, and I will find out that history.
Because then it makes me think of like homeschool or things, especially during this pandemic, right? You're gonna have kids maybe be homeschooled, maybe they come back, and then maybe they need to know that if they do want to come back, right? If they have a
Right.
desire to be in those groups, that makes sense, yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I will research that, bring it back to a future policy committee meeting. So this will not go on next month's board meeting. I think we have a little bit of a wiggle room because
Yeah.
graduation's not around the corner,
Right.
not right around the
Not like
corner.
last time,
But we don't want to
yeah.
wait too long, because I do think it's really important for the parents to
Yeah.
know that this whole designation piece, so that
Yeah.
we don't have a repeat of what happened last year.
Right.
Okay, so I'll speak to him, and right now, it's my understanding, you're not going to be here in October.
October, yeah. I won't be here for that, yeah.
So I was thinking that we wouldn't have a meeting, a policy committee meeting in October, but I don't know, maybe we still do.
Maybe we'll just go with Tony. He's going someplace nice.
It's just a word, yeah, yeah, sorry.
Well, we can talk about that at the
Road
end, I
trip, but
guess,
yeah.
but, okay.
Yeah, let's come back to
No,
Okay.
yeah,
that. I'd be okay, yeah, if we can figure out whatever works to move the group forward.
Okay.
makes sense.
So we've covered nice discussion. We covered 2 policies. We're going to come back to policy BED, which is the new sample policy from Maine School Management regarding remote participation in
Okay.
school board meetings.
So this requires, hopefully you had a chance to thoroughly read this policy. So I thoroughly read it, and I pulled out the law to make sure that I understood it. I found where our attorney had created kind of like a white paper on it to explain it. And then I found another document from a different law firm that had a bit of a different slant on the law. And so in preparation for tonight, I was like, I don't know what to recommend because I don't know what guidance to provide. So I actually spoke to our attorney today about it to try to get some guidance. And here's the piece that I think I'm now clear on, is it has to do with public participation if we're conducting a remote meeting or an opportunity for a remote meeting. So what we did this past year, which was very similar to a lot of school districts around the state, I spoke to him about that and he was like, it was pretty common practice where remotely we had the board meet. And then we gave lots of opportunities for members of the public to write to us in advance. And we read what they wrote during the meetings. There was talk chat and Martha would monitor that. They could call in, they could email us, and we did our best to communicate. So there was a kind of a two-way dialogue that went on. However, the way the new law is written, that's really not something that we're going to be able to do. Because the way the law is written, it says that the policy must provide members of the public a meaningful opportunity to attend by remote methods when members of the body participate by remote methods, and reasonable accommodations then have to be made for those individuals. So basically what it is saying is that if you allow as a board, that if you accept a policy and design a policy that allows a board member to participate in the meeting using a remote technology, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever it is, for reasons that are identified in this policy. So it's very specific. It can't be, I just don't feel like driving in today. It has to be that there is a state of emergency, that there's an illness or a physical condition, that you're injured and you can't drive, that there may be a significant distance. You're in California, you're working in Portland, and you have to be down there overnight. So you would access from Portland, but you just can't be here tonight. Or if there are other geographic characteristics that impede someone from getting here, like the island people, right?
Yeah.
For as an example. So if those conditions exist, it allows you to have a board meeting in person, allow members of the public to be here in person. And if you want, if you decide to adopt a policy, again, you can't do it without a policy, you can allow that board member to participate remotely. But if you open it up and allow participation from that board member and not just say, listen to the live stream, now you need to open up that meeting and allow members of the public to also attend that meeting. And you need to allow members of the public who attend that meeting the opportunity to have a meaningful two-way conversation with the board. So they have to be able to speak and let the board hear. Now, if it's done during public comment, it might not be a two-way conversation. It may be that the person gets to publicly just communicate and speak, and then it's done. Terry gets to control who speaks, right? As the owner or the, whatever it's called, but the host, thank you. She can say who can speak, who can't speak, that type of thing. But on page 2 of this policy draft, this is just a draft policy that was sent to us. It says that an effective means of communication between the members of the public, of the board and the public must be provided, but it gives an example of submitting comments or questions by chat, raising hand on Zoom, submitting written comments to the superintendent's office at least 24 hours in advance. That could be interpreted as saying what we did last year was okay under this policy, but it's really
It's kind of
not. That's really not the intent.
Right.
So, one, I want you to talk about whether you want this policy or not, because there's a logistical piece here, all right? So if you are in a board meeting, you have 50 people in the public in front of you, and you have another 50 people, I'm just worst case scenario, you know. You have a board member zooming in, and you have 50 other people who all want to chat. Being able to manage the two is a bit of a concern.
Yeah.
Terry's been thinking about that, and she has some ideas on how to do that. You can allow phone calls to actually come into the meeting if you want. It doesn't have to be only a Zoom, although I can't imagine trying to run the meeting and having the phone ringing in here so that you can hear people. I think that would be extremely difficult. So I need you guys to really kind of talk about whether that's something that you want to recommend to the full board, understanding the potential implications. I've asked Terry to think about it, as I said, and Terry can mention maybe some ideas that she has to make that happen. And I kind of drafted language to replace on the top of page 2, where it says the opportunity for the public to comment at board meetings applies to remote public meetings. If a board allows or is required to provide an opportunity for public participation, public input during the meeting, I would say it must be done in a meaningful manner that allows members of the public to speak directly to the board. Public comment may not be restricted to text-only means such as email, text messages, or chat functions. That doesn't mean you can't accept them. Doesn't mean that you can't include them. It means you can't restrict it to just that form. So,
But I wonder, does that then, so I guess I think of when we do get the top chats, right, or the comments, some of them, I would say maybe 1/3 of them are demanding a response and the other 2/3 aren't, right? So would we have to set up in the policy like that we will respond? Part of me wants to say yes and part of me wants to say no, that we'll respond to every comment appropriately. That's an additional thing we must do, or do we just need to listen to the?
no, I don't think so. I think one, if you allowing, I think there were a couple things here.
Yeah.
If you're allowing the opportunity for members of the public to directly communicate with the board, then you disable chat. Part of this becomes a logistical
Yeah, I agree.
challenge.
Yeah.
Different streams of,
Yeah.
Correct. You're giving
Communication
people an opportunity so they don't also need to be doing chat. You also need to go back to your public participation policy. Your public participation policy says, and what the law says, is that you have to give the public an opportunity to communicate with the board. You have a public comment section at the beginning of your agenda, and that's the time for the members to participate. This is a business meeting. It is not an opportunity, unless you allow it,
Right.
for all members of the public to have a two-way dialogue. That's not it.
Okay.
When we began doing our Zoom meetings, because members of the public were not involved or right in the meeting with us, we added that second public comment section at the end, just so that we could be responsive to members of the public. But I don't see that continuing. We don't need to do that because people will have this opportunity. The question then becomes, for me, new board members, when you have a public comment section and you have members of the public will make a comment, then you move on to another point, another topic. There have been times in the past where the board has allowed members of the public to chime in on that conversation so that there's been a two-way conversation. That's not always the case. It kind of depends on the situation.
How did that work? Was it good?
It depends. Sometimes it went well, sometimes it didn't. I mean, it depends on the issue. Sometimes it gets contentious. And sometimes it's, hey, I'd love for you to think about this. And then the board has questions. And so it's a great two-way dialogue. So the board will have to decide what it wants to do. Do you want to keep it flexible enough so you can still have that opportunity? Do you want to limit all public comment just to that public comment section?
I think we should keep it open and flexible for everybody. I just know, and I'm not a downy person, I'm very optimistic, but I just know that things are going to get bad again.
Well,
And I think it would be nice to be able to have the public involved if they can't be in the room.
so that's a different policy. So now you're talking about changing the public participation policy, which we're not doing today.
Right, it's just
But
the
it is
remote, yeah.
something that you need to think about because it's really a management piece.
Yeah.
You know, it's your board meeting, it's your business meeting. It's not it's not necessarily an opportunity for a two-way conversation about everything. Otherwise, you're not going to get through your business. So it's finding that delicate balance so
Yeah.
that you can hear what people have to say, but you're still able to conduct your work that you need to have done.
So should we like think about it and table it to the next meeting or do you want to?
Well, I just want you to talk about whether you want to have a remote, whether you want to even consider having the option of remote meetings if a member of the board meets the criteria and can't be here.
I'm sorry. I have a really hard time with masks. I have had my shots. I have a compromised immune system and I feel comfortable not wearing a mask. So if I have to wear a mask during the meetings, it might make me be on a Zoom call meeting.
Well, I don't know that meets the requirement in the law. Because the law says, here are the reasons. And so it's outlined in the law as to what they are. And I don't know that meets it. So an illness or physical condition. So I don't know if that meets it or not. But Terry has some ideas regarding the management piece, which is a concern. So
Actually, Jim had something to say.
Yeah, I had one question.
Question.
Why don't, occasionally, we have a group petitioning the board to either recognize a team, recognize a club, something along that nature. And then there will be some give and take on that specific issue. So that might come into our process of how do we keep this, how do we address the law and keep that part available? So, and I don't know that, I'm not trying to ask for an answer, I'm just saying that's a concern.
but, and if they're here, you can treat that the way you've always treated it
In person, yeah.
in person. The question is, if you have all of these people in person and you have all of those people on Zoom, and maybe it's a different agenda, you just have to think about the management of all of that. If you have one board member there and everyone else here.
It's always hard to get all of us to turn our mics off at the same time when we weren't talking. I'm just thinking of 100 people with their mics on.
She, as the host, will have control and
Okay.
can keep everyone's mic off.
Yep.
So
Mute all.
can she just talk about what
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah,
process might
please.
be? And then I'll stop talking because I do think as a policy committee, you need to kind of discuss whether this is something you want to pursue or not.
So Pat and I did a little brainstorming this afternoon, and what we thought was, I agree with Pat. I think for Pat or whoever's managing the meeting, it's gonna be really difficult to manage the meeting and run the live stream Zoom as well. And so I think there needs to be some co-hosts if we decide to do this, where co-hosts will manage whose hand goes up and whose hand goes down. And so that does take more resources for the meeting. I don't think it can just be like one. If it's a meeting like this today, it will be very easy. But if it's a meeting of 50 people wanting to talk, that does take some management. So that is a little bit more finessing.
It'll be more resource intensive. And I know what you mean, because it's somebody to run the camera, but also to run the media streams, and then Becky's running the meeting. And I'm feeling like, yes, I would want to have obviously a much larger discussion and be ready to have that larger discussion when we get there. So there's some of that sort of jockeying there. What about any thoughts about the time management of it?
Or like to how long they can speak or something, you mean? Yeah.
Well, that's determined by the chair.
Sure,
And
right.
again, that's part of your public participation policy.
Yep.
And so like at the last meeting, she was very clear. So that would remain the same.
Yep.
But there's something else to think about. If what the policy allows is that if you can't be in person, then it allows, with this criteria, then there's the potential of having this remote meeting. Does that create confusion to the community when in December, we happen to have a board member who's going to be away, meets this criteria, and they're not going to be here, so we're going to have that remote option. But in January, February, March, that option doesn't exist. They either have to come here or they have to go to just live stream and listen. So just something else to be thinking about in terms of clarity for the community, the running of it, et cetera.
I had a couple questions. The way this is written, it says someone who is participating remotely constitutes a quorum, but without any specifics. So I could sign in, turn my camera off and walk away. There's officially a quorum for the purposes of the meeting. So I'm a little concerned that's too loose.
So I think we'd have to be really clear that as a board member, if you had to participate remotely, if you met the criteria, your camera would have to stay on
Yeah, you have to actively
and you
participate,
have to
right?
participate.
Yeah.
And if you leave, then it's like leaving the boardroom and that you're no longer,
Yeah.
you're no longer present.
And if-
The second, and I'm laughing at this a little bit, in typical legal fashion, reasons to attend remotely is because of significant difficulty or significant distance without defining significant, which means it's subjective.
It
Yeah.
totally
So
is.
like crossing town is kind of, maybe it's raining.
Yeah.
It feels significantly difficult today. So that's really open-ended.
Yeah. It's just
But-
interesting to tie the idea of a board member to what the remote part for the public is. Those seem like separate things to me.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm just like not clear on how to make a decision when they seem like a separate thing, but I also understand why they kind of tied them together a little bit there.
Well, and I think, of course, the significance would be California. You know, if you're in Portland and you're staying overnight because of work, that might be too far to travel up and then have to drive back. Across town is not significant, although I can see that is not significant. If it's within the community that you serve, that's not significant. But when you think about some of these school boards, depending on weather, I think about Washington County,
Yeah, right.
right? And how far, or Aroostook County, how far some of them have to drive, that could be significant.
I do like that idea that if we do it as a board, that still makes sense. Obviously, in the event of a state declared emergency, or if we decide to do it as a board, then it just switches over from in-person to virtual, and we switch back to that whole model that we developed. I know we're sort of on the in-between right now because we've got the masks, but we're back to in-person, which to me says to return to the in-person model we've been using.
Why can't we do what we did last year?
Because last year, because of the state of emergency, the law allowed us, we were allowed to participate remotely. Once the state of emergency ended, and it was 30 days beyond when the state of emergency ended, which was July 30th, that law, that was no longer permissible. We had to go back to the previous law that said you needed to be in person. So, and if you weren't in person, your vote didn't count. You couldn't be remote. You couldn't call in and register your vote. So this law was passed this spring as a way of, I think, recognizing that we now have this technology, right? That we've gotten used to it, and that there may be times in which it's appropriate to allow remote participation. It just not every time and only under these very limited conditions. So, I mean, it's 6:24. I think, like I said, this is a longer conversation. And so as Teresa said, I think we need to talk more about it at a future meeting, but
Yeah.
I just need you to think about the implications, whether it will work for us, whether it won't work for you, what you want to do, how we want to proceed, whether you want this policy, whether you want a modification to this policy.
And we probably should look at the other one about how we interact with the public anyway, because it seems like we keep going there since this is sort of part of it, right?
We can, you guys have the policy, the
Yeah.
public participation
Mhm.
policy in your folder. You have the manual, the flyer or the brochure rather. And so you can reference that, and certainly we can look at it if you want. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about the implications of public participation at the same time that we're thinking about the management, the logistical management of running a meeting. And how do we do that hand in hand?
In a timely manner.
In a timely manner, so you're not here until 1 o'clock for every meeting, which is again why this board years ago established the policy that you max out at 3 hours, understanding that after 3 hours, you're just not gonna be
What
effective.
can you do? Right, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if we're gonna table that, and we're almost ready to start the
Yeah.
board meeting, what is your wish on having a board meeting, a policy committee meeting in October? Oh, let me start there before I
Yeah.
add to it.
So I would like to be at the policy meeting where we talk about this more, if we're gonna have a more, in-depth discussion on it. And unfortunately will be absent that night, and this wouldn't even help me.
Can we adjust the date?
Yeah, we can look at it if you
Yeah.
guys want to do it on a different night. I would have to send out,
Oh,
in September, Andrea, are we going to have a finance committee meeting?
I have a few things for the agenda, so I anticipate yes.
So maybe we could link those two meetings together. And have policy followed by finance. And finance usually begins at 6.
I thought we were doing them at 5:30.
I think it's 5:30, right? And it's like the 21st, right, or something?
The third Tuesday of the month.
Third Tuesday, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Are you
mean-
available at 4:30? In person?
Tuesday of the month. Let me just-
So then we're talking about the 21st.
It is the 21st, yeah.
If 4:30 won't work, we can certainly move finance to 5 or 5:30 or whatever. A half an hour later.
Let's see, can 4:30 work, or do we need it to be 5?
I have a hard time even getting here at 5:30.
Okay,
Let's see, the 21st Tuesday right there.
I agree we should table this, but could I put a parting thought in before we do? Two of the biggest constituencies we serve are parents with kids who have a hard time getting to a board meeting because they have kids. And retirees who have a big dog in the fight because they're concerned about tax increases and managing their budgets. So I think if we have to lean toward inconvenience in order to make the process more accessible to the public, then we ought to stretch a little and do that.
I hear that.
I'll do the 21st. I'll just,
at 4:30?
yeah, I'll
Yeah,
rearrange
that'll work.
whatever.
So that's September 21st.
Yep.
So that's the pre-October.
Pre-October, but that means that
That's
we will not have a policy committee meeting
On the 7th,
before the board meeting in October.
which would be the 7th, right? Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
We'll do this one in lieu of. And the other thing to be thinking of, and we don't have a policy on this because this is all new, is kind of back to a question I asked at the beginning of policy committee. How many meetings and which meetings are you going to live stream? Are you live streaming every single time that you have a committee meeting? If you do, we need to be thinking about the impact on our technology department, because that means every single time I need to have Terry here. And taking Terry away from work. I think we need to give Terry a stipend, but how many times you're going to have her here will depend on a recommendation for that stipend and how much that's going to be. Or do you only live stream board meetings? You know, a regular board meeting, a special board meeting, an emergency board meeting, a time when everyone is here. We still post them the same. We still communicate with the public the same way to notify them that there are meetings. These are still open to the public. They can come to policy or curriculum or finance, although finance, we usually do live stream during the budget season.
Anyway, yeah.
So that's entirely up to the board and what they want to do. So I just feel like we need to have a conversation and you can make that determination.
Because we've kind of talked about trying to also lessen the load of taking all the notes and making the agenda and the follow-up minutes as cumbersome too. So it's sort of
Correct.
which end of that, do we allow it to be available out on YouTube or live streamed and then vice versa?
Correct.
Yeah.
And of course, the heavy lift is really the regular board meeting,
Right.
those minutes. These are easier for me. I think curriculum can sometimes require a lot of minutes. I don't know about finance. Finance, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not too bad, right? Yeah, so,
Not all of the meetings, committee meetings are here, like dropout.
I was
We've
gonna
always
say,
done that
right.
at the middle school.
Yeah.
Or this may be the high school this year, but
so those are, sorry, I have this bug in
You know,
front of
there's
me.
like a little fruit fly or something.
That is
Sure.
like a sub type of committee. I'm thinking
I always
our
thought myself as
fundamental
one.
committees. I'm thinking the fundamental committees, the
Negotiation.
policy, well, negotiations is always
It's
like
always
an executive
private.
session, so
Yeah.
that's private.
Yeah.
But policy.
Yeah.
Finance,
And
curriculum, those are
Yeah.
really the three big ones in addition to the board, so.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right.
6:31.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Well, I was looking at preparing, luckily, sometimes I'm preparing like an hour before I walk in. I did it earlier. So